Achilles Legends Untold is the debut game of Polish studio Darkpoint Games. From that debut perspective, it is impressive and it has some interesting features. But after finishing the game 8 hours later, I also have to admit that it's just an average game that ultimately fails to make a strong impression. At the time of writing, Steam reviews are at 74% positive, which I feel is right on the money. Here's my review for Achilles Legends Untold, and a big thanks to the devs for providing a review key. First, some specs, options and context. I've played the game on both PC using a controller and the Steam Deck because it's verified. It's really smooth on PC. On Steam Deck, make sure you turn down some of the graphical options. The game has plenty of those, features DLSS and FSR, plus plenty of audio and gameplay settings too, like hiding the minimap. I didn't have a single crash in my entire playthrough and no game-breaking bugs either. The game offers co-op, which I did not play. To manage expectations, Achilles Legends Untold isn't a game like PoE or Last Epoch with builds, endgame, tons of loot and millions of monsters. It's much closer to Rise, Son of Rome, if you want a comparison. The game is a story-driven retelling of ancient Greek mythology featuring gods and monsters, while slaying a bunch of enemies with unique movesets and abilities. The story is set during the Trojan War and is loosely based on Achilles. Our hero and his mythical band of soldiers, the Myrmidons, storm the gates of Troy, and outside of those gates awaits Hector, your first boss fight. Soon after, you kill Paris and a whole bunch of others, and it becomes pretty clear that the devs have taken some liberty here with the myths and weren't too interested in following it to the letter. Which I'm fine with, by the way. You set a cascade of events in motion, get cast into the future and need to find the Smith. The next 8 hours you're embarking on a journey about redemption and revenge. That journey, however, is hampered by a few factors. First, the voice acting. I applaud the devs for getting everything voice acted, but the talent behind the characters are not that convincing. Accents and performance are all over the place, with some gods speaking a Southern American, almost Texan accent.
That's out of the question. That won't work for anyone, especially for those who have blood on their hands, and you, to my eye, have a lot of it.
While others are more Greek or Eastern Europe sounding, and then Achilles himself has just a super weird accent I can't even place. It should be Greek, I suppose, and maybe it is, but I didn't find it convincing at all.
To survive, it must have been some miracle.
I need to try and find him. Thanks for the information.
Take care. If you believe the rumors, that beast is a true monstrosity.
Achilles is also constantly in a gaming mode, meaning he's saying things which no one would ever say, and he's constantly talking to himself in an effort to let the player know what to do. I wish all of that was simply cut out, as it adds nothing to the game. On top of this, the game takes itself very seriously. There's hardly any humor in the dialogues or writing, which is fine, but if the delivery of something so serious is subpar, it's hard to get invested in what's going on. During his adventure, Achilles has a few ways to improve himself. As you level up or free prisoners or kill certain bosses, you receive passive skill points. There's a constellation system, somewhat similar to Grim Dawn, where you can spend these points. The vast majority of points, however, are passive stats like +1 strength or endurance, and in order to receive the bonus of an entire constellation, you need to take every passive in that constellation, making it really not much of a choice at all. It's one of those systems that at first glance seems to offer a lot of freedom, but once you get into it, you realize that's not the case at all. And some of the constellations are so incredibly good, like restoring health after you've been hit, that you would be crazy to skip the constellation. This is especially true for the constellations closest to the starting point. They offer vital abilities and upgrades which you would take in any build, and therefore I would say there aren't any builds to speak of really. Which isn't to say that you don't have some agency in your playstyle. Your biggest decision in the playthrough will likely be if you wield a two-hander or a sword and shield. You can dual wield as well if you want. I've tried it all, and while playstyles definitely differ to some extent, the difference isn't that significant that you would play through the entire game again just to try out sword and board. Using the smith I talked about earlier, you can upgrade your gear, providing significant power. Loot has different rarity and skills with different stats, providing many options to deck out your character. An aspect I quite enjoyed was the upgrading and crafting, that was fun. It aligns well with the exploration too, because you find a ton of loot from chests, underground cellars and random bosses you encountered in the wild. It really pays to open the map, venture towards the question marks indicating a point of interest, and play that loot game if you're into that. The world in Achilles is one of the better aspects of the game together with the combat. I think the game is very pretty at times, and exploring the world, doing side quests and just traversing the lands gives me good vibes. There are plenty of enemies to kill, but unless you rest at shrines, they don't respawn. It's like bonfires in that regard. The world has many different biomes, if you can call it that, a wide variety in scenery, from poisonous swamps and treacherous mountain paths to castles and labyrinths, and even the shadow-infested underworld in the later parts of the game. They're all convincing, the lighting is pretty, it has god rays, which always warms my heart, and it's the game at its best. Another standout feature is the combat. It's typically good, it's interesting, it can be quite difficult, and this is definitely not the game where you just rush in and start bashing. You'll need to be methodical. Enemies are quite clever, at least the humans, and thoughtful. Skillful combat is the name of the game. The game is leveraging what the devs call group AI action. Essentially, enemies, in particular humans, interact with each other to perform special combos against you. It's very cool. I don't want to oversell the feature, however, because it also gets old and there aren't really that many combinations available, so while it does add a dynamic layer to combat, after an hour you're not that surprised anymore if one enemy uses the shield of his body as a jump-off point to land a devastating ground slam on you. Still, quite a unique feature that you don't often see in games in the genre. You do reach a point, however, where the novelty wears off, as the enemy variety isn't all that big. Plus, as you keep upgrading your gear and character, you do become quite strong. You can take a few hits which you also recover from due to the passives I talked about earlier. Over time, combat definitely gets a lot easier. But that doesn't take away the valiant effort here to create combat in an isometric game which requires skill, which is appreciated. Another feature related to combat I enjoyed were the bosses. Some of them are a bit tedious, but for the most part they have well telegraphed attacks and there is a sense of accomplishment when killing a boss. At the end of each boss you have the option for some reason to kill or spare them. I killed them all, of course, and got an achievement for that, but otherwise I didn't notice any significant difference. When you finish the game, there's a New Game Plus mode allowing you to continue with your gear, weapons and level, but I see zero reason to do this, which brings me to the verdict of this game. Achilles Legends Untold is an interesting attempt to bring some thought and skill into combat in isometric hack-and-slash ARPGs, and it partly succeeds in that. However, even with the 8 to 10 hours it may take you to complete this game, it tends to overstay its welcome. Combat features are good, but can't carry the whole game on its Atlassian shoulders, and the narrative is like the birds of prey picking away at the foundation. But still, it's an okay game. It's nothing special, but it's not offensive either. It's balanced, polished, well optimized, pretty much bug-free, at least the version I tested. It is feature complete. I mean, these days, you know. Now, at the moment of writing, the price of this game in early access is €23. It's probably $25 to $30 in the States. And when it launches, that's also when this review launches, maybe it will be a bit more expensive even. Would I buy this game for €23? I mean, probably not, knowing what I know now. But let's say you're a fan of games like Rise, Son of Rome, and you like what you see, and you don't mind the downsides I've been talking about, then sure, get the game. In time, this game will be available for like €10–15, and then I definitely think it's a good buy. Hopefully this review helps you decide. If so, give it a like, maybe subscribe as I do more ARPG content. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. Love you all, see you soon, bye.